My name is Lila M. Carver. I am 24 years old. When people hear that I had my stepmother arrested for fraud 3 days after my father's funeral, they picture some cold, heartless daughter who only cared about the money. But the truth started long before handcuffs and courtrooms. It started at a kitchen table, with my dad coming home every night covered in sawdust and cement dust, smelling like sweat and coffee, and still sitting down to help me with algebra when I was 8. Dad was everything. A single father who stepped in when my mom walked out and never looked back. He built his construction company from nothing, one 16-hour day after another, so I could have everything he never did. Private school, braces, a shot at college without drowning in loans. He'd joke that we were Carver and Carver Inc., him building houses, me building straight A's. 3 days after he died suddenly of a heart attack, I was still moving through the world like a ghost. The funeral flowers were already starting to wilt. His work boots were still by the back door of my apartment, where he'd kicked them off the last time he stopped by. His favorite mug, World's Okayest Dad, sat on my counter where I left it because I couldn't bring myself to wash away the last coffee stains. That's when Patricia called. "Lila," she said, her voice soft and breathy, "the lawyer wants us to come in and go over your father's will. Can you meet me there at 2?" She always called him your father instead of his name. I don't know why that bothered me so much. "Yeah," I said, "I'll be there." Patricia and my dad had only been married for 2 years. She was 34, just 10 years older than me, with perfect manicures, perfect hair, and a faint floral perfume that made me think of gift shops. They met at some charity gala where she'd been volunteering. I never trusted the way she watched me when she thought I wasn't looking, like she was doing math in her head and I was part of the equation. When I walked into the lawyer's office, Patricia was already sitting at the polished mahogany table in a black sheath dress, a single pearl necklace, eyes red but dry. Her grief looked curated. "Lila," she said, standing up to air kiss my cheek, "you look exhausted. Sit, sweetheart." I sat. The lawyer, a gray-haired man named Harlan I'd seen once or twice when Dad took me to sign documents, cleared his throat. "Ms. Carver," he began, folding his hands. "First, let me offer my condolences. Your father spoke of you often and with great pride." "Thank you," I murmured. He slid a stack of papers toward Patricia, toward me. "As you know, your father prepared a new will shortly after his marriage to Patricia. I'm afraid the contents may come as a surprise." My stomach tightened. He glanced at Patricia, then at me. "Your father's will leaves everything, the house, the construction company, all personal and business assets, to his wife Patricia." For a second, I thought I misheard him. "What?" I said. Patricia dabbed delicately at the corner of her eye with a tissue that looked suspiciously unused. "He wanted me to be secure," she said. "That's what he told me. You're so young, Lila. You have your whole life ahead of you." My throat went dry. "That's impossible," I managed. He always said the company would be mine. He's been training me to take over since I was 16. We had plans, expansion blueprints, meetings with investors." The room started to tilt. My dad had shown me his will just 6 months earlier, sitting at my kitchen table, going over life insurance policies and medical directives. I remembered the way his hand shook slightly from the medications, the tremor making his signature look like controlled lightning. "You'll be a rich woman someday," he'd joked. "You've earned every penny by putting up with your old man and his terrible jokes." He did not joke about Patricia owning everything. Now Harlan was talking about full transfer of shares and sole beneficiary, and I could barely hear him over the roar in my ears. Patricia reached for my hand across the table. Her fingers were cold. "Lila, honey, I know this is a shock," she said, voice dripping sympathy. "But your father told me he trusted you to build your own path. He didn't want you tied down to his company. He said he'd already given you so much." I pulled my hand back. "Did he tell you that when I was sitting right there?" I asked. "Or when you two were alone?" Her smile flickered. After the meeting, I stood on the sidewalk in front of the building, trying to breathe. My phone buzzed. "Ethan." "Hey," he said when I answered. "How did it go?" I stared at my reflection in the glass, pale and stunned. Apparently, my dad left everything to Patricia. Silence, then. "That doesn't make sense. He worshipped you." "He changed his will," I said. "Supposedly." "Supposedly," Ethan repeated. I could hear the skepticism in his voice. "Lila, don't freak out yet. Let's see the documents. There might be something off." "His lawyer seemed convinced," I whispered. "Lawyers read what's in front of them," Ethan said. "They don't always know how it got there." The words lodged in my chest. I hung up and drove home on autopilot. My hands didn't feel like they belonged to me. When I walked into my apartment, Dad's work boots were still by the door. I sat down on the floor next to them and cried until my head hurt. That night, when the storm in my chest quieted enough for me to think, I remembered something. During his illness, I'd helped Dad organize his paperwork, insurance, business records, legal documents. He'd insisted that copies of the important stuff stay at my place, so if the house burns down, at least the paperwork doesn't. I got up, wiped my face, and pulled a plastic storage bin from under my bed. Insurance policies, tax returns, contracts. And then, a thin blue folder labeled in Dad's shaky handwriting, Will, copy. My hands shook as I opened it. There it was, a will dated 8 months before his death. My name listed as primary heir, inheriting 85% of everything. Company, house, liquid assets. Patricia getting a small trust for security purposes. Exactly what he'd told me. I flipped through the pages, memorizing every line. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the scanned copy the lawyer had emailed me of the updated will Patricia presented. 3 weeks later date. Everything to Patricia. And my father's signature. I stared at it for a long time. In the original will, his signature wobbled in that familiar way, the tremor from his meds making the lines as jagged but intentional. In the newer one, the signature was smooth, confident. No hesitation, no tremor. Like a younger version of his hand had reached out of the past to sign it, or like someone had traced it until they got it right. The next morning, I took both documents to a forensic handwriting expert downtown. The office smelled like coffee and toner. The examiner, an older woman with sharp eyes and steady hands, laid the pages side by side under a lamp. She studied in silence, making small notes, occasionally glancing up at me. "Your father was on medication, you said?" she asked. "Yes, it made his hands shake." She nodded, pointed at the original signature. "You can see the tremor here, controlled, but present." Then she tapped the newer will. "Here, there's no tremor at all. The pressure distribution is different. The rhythm is wrong. This signature is not natural. It's copied." My heart pounded. "So it's forged," I whispered. "In my professional opinion," she said, "yes, someone forged this will." That afternoon, I sat in a hard plastic chair at the police station, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, while Detective Reynolds read through the report and both wills. He was in his early 40s, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much and still cared. "This isn't just a family dispute," he said finally, looking up at me. "This is substantial fraud, Ms. Carver. We're talking about roughly $2.3 million in assets." He tapped the forged will. "Based on this expert analysis, we have probable cause. We'll be seeking a warrant to search Patricia's records and the house." I swallowed. "What happens when you do?" I asked. He met my eyes, voice calm but edged with steel. "Then," he said, "we find out how far your stepmother was willing to go to rewrite your father's legacy." The warrant moved faster than I expected. 2 days after my meeting with Detective Reynolds, I stood across the street from what should have been my father's house and watched squad cars pull up in front of it. Blue and red lights bounced off the white siding and perfect hedges. The house looked smaller suddenly, like a stage set waiting for the next act. Patricia opened the front door in a cream blouse and black slacks, perfectly composed. For a second, she tried to play it off, confused, concerned, the dutiful widow. Then Reynolds stepped forward, badge visible, warrant in hand. "Mrs. Carver," he said, "we have a warrant to search the premises and seize documents related to your late husband's estate." "What?" she breathed. "There must be some mistake." Her eyes slid past him and found me. For the first time, her mask cracked. "Lila," she said, voice tight, "what did you do?" I didn't answer. Officers moved around her into the house. She stood frozen on the doorstep, one hand gripping the doorframe hard enough to whiten her knuckles. Ethan's hand brushed mine, grounding me. He'd insisted on coming, even though I'd warned him it might get ugly. "Breathe," he murmured. It felt like all I'd been doing for days was trying to remember how. Inside, they found more than anyone expected. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a cramped interview room at the station with Detective Reynolds and a thick file in front of him. "We pulled Patricia's computer," he said. "Her search history is interesting." He slid a photocopy across the table. "How to change a will without heir knowing. Digitalis dosage lethal heart patient. Forged signature legal evidence." My skin crawled. "We also found this," he added, placing a different will on the table. "Drafted 3 weeks after the one your father showed you. The same document Patricia had presented at the lawyer's office. But," he continued, "she made a mistake." He flipped to the last page. "Your father's old lawyer, Garrett, was listed as witness on the original will, but he retired before this version was supposedly signed. Patricia typed his name on the witness line and then tried to mimic his scrawl. He confirmed he never saw this document. There it was, sloppiness beneath the polish. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now we dig," he said. "More than just fraud is starting to stink here." The next call came a day later. I was at home, staring at my dad's boots again, when my phone lit up. "Lila, it's Reynolds. I need you to come in." When I got to the station, he didn't waste time. "We got your father's full autopsy," he said. "Rush toxicology." I tried to read his face and failed. "You said heart attack," I reminded him. He had heart problems already. "Yeah," Reynolds said, which is exactly what someone would use as cover. He opened a folder. Inside were graphs, charts, numbers that didn't mean anything until he translated them. "Your father had elevated levels of digitalis in his system, 10 times the therapeutic dose." I frowned. "Digitalis, like heart medication?" He nodded. "At normal levels, it helps regulate rhythm. At high levels, it can trigger fatal arrhythmias." My stomach dropped. "But he had prescriptions," I said. "He took his meds every day." "And Patricia managed his pills," Reynolds said quietly. "She refilled them, organized them, brought him coffee with his doses." The memory hit me so hard I had to grip the edge of the chair. Sunday mornings at their house, Dad at the table, joking about carbs, Patricia bringing him a little tray with his mug and a neat row of pills. "She was so attentive," I whispered. "Very caring," Reynolds said. "That's what makes this kind of predator so dangerous." The word stuck to the inside of my skull. Predator. I didn't know whether to cry or punch through a wall. Instead, I asked, "What are you saying, exactly?" He met my eyes. "I'm saying your father's death was not a natural heart attack," he said. "It was homicide." I went cold. "And we have reason to believe," he added, "that Patricia has done this before." He slid another file in front of me. "Her name isn't just Patricia Carver," he said. "We've found records under Patricia Kellerman and Patricia Foster. 2 previous marriages, 2 dead husbands, both with last-minute will changes in her favor." I stared at the photos, different men, different smiles, the same woman on their arm. "These husbands," I said slowly, "how did they die?" Reynolds' jaw tightened. "One, apparent suicide by pill overdose. The other, a climbing accident." He shrugged grimly. Both had recent changes to their wills. Both had wives who came into a lot of money and moved on quickly. My blood ran cold. "So my dad," I started. "Wasn't her first victim," he finished. "They arrested Patricia that afternoon. I didn't want to go, but I went anyway. I needed to see her face when the story shifted from inheritance squabble to murder investigation. Officers escorted her out of my father's house in handcuffs, hair still perfectly styled, lips pressed together in a thin line. Neighbors stopped on sidewalks, pretending not to stare. A news van had already pulled up, camera crew scrambling out. When Patricia saw me, she lunged forward, nearly yanking the officers off balance. "This is your fault," she spat. "You ungrateful little—" "Mrs. Carver," one cop warned, tightening his grip. "She's lying," Patricia shouted at no one and everyone. "She's just jealous her father loved me. This is all about money." Her tissue from the lawyer's office had been dry. Her eyes now? Dry as dust. "No grief, just rage." "She forged your father's will," Reynolds said firmly in front of the cameras. "We have forensic proof." He didn't mention the word murder yet. Not out there, not with microphones pointed at his face. But it was coming. Over the next few weeks, the investigation snowballed. They exhumed the bodies of Patricia's previous husbands. Toxicology reports confirmed the same digitalis poisoning. Patterns emerged. Similar doses, similar timing, similar sudden tragedies no one had questioned too closely. The media picked up the story, slapped a name on it. "The Widowmaker," one headline read. I watched in numb horror as my stepmother's face flashed on TV screens. File photos from charity events. Her arm looped through my father's, laughing at something just out of frame. Reporters camped outside the station, outside my apartment, outside the construction company office. "Did you suspect anything?" they asked whenever they got close enough. I thought about Sunday dinners, about her healthy lifestyle crusades, about how she'd encourage my dad to push himself harder on the treadmill, despite his cardiologist's warnings. "She was very caring," I said once. It sounded twisted even to my own ears. Ethan tried to shield me from some of it. He walked me to my car, fielded calls, made me eat when I forgot. His ex, Chloe, the one I'd always side-eyed because she worked at the same firm as Patricia's attorney, showed up at the coffee shop one afternoon looking pale. I shouldn't be here, she said, clutching her drink in both hands. But I thought you should know something. I tensed out of habit. Okay. Patricia came into the firm months ago, Chloe said. She didn't just ask about updating a will. She asked detailed questions about how easily wills could be contested, about how suspicious a signature would have to look to be thrown out. She said she was writing a crime novel. Chloe grimaced. I didn't believe her. Why didn't you say anything sooner? I asked, the accusation slipping out before I could stop it. Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. Because I thought it wasn't my place, she said. Because I didn't want Ethan caught in the middle. Because I didn't want to believe someone could be that calculated. She shook her head. I was wrong. I'm sorry, Lila. For the first time, I saw Chloe not as Ethan's ex, but as another person blindsided by Patricia's performance. Detective Reynolds added Chloe's statement to the evidence pile, another piece in a growing portrait of premeditated evil. The trial prep took months. I met with prosecutors, answered the same questions over and over. Yes, my dad had shown me his original will. Yes, he'd planned to leave me the company. Yes, Patricia had controlled his medications. No, I hadn't suspected she was poisoning him. I wished I had. One night, after yet another meeting at the DA's office, I sat alone in my father's office at the construction company. His leather chair creaked softly when I leaned back. His framed degree hung crooked on the wall. His old coffee mug sat on the corner of the desk, still stained at the bottom. I should have felt vindicated. We had caught the monster. Instead, I felt hollow. Like all of this, the forensics, the headlines, the looming trial, was just surface. Like there was still something underneath I wasn't seeing. That feeling sharpened. The day they transferred Patricia from county jail to the courthouse for her arraignment on multiple counts of murder and fraud. I was standing outside with Reynolds when they brought her out in shackles, orange jumpsuit stark against the gray stone steps. Reporters shouted her name, cameras flashed. She scanned the crowd until she found me. For a moment, the performance dropped. No tears, no trembling lip, no grieving widow. Just calculation. Cold, measured, assessing. Our eyes locked. You have no idea what you've started, she mouthed. Someone tugged her forward. An officer nudged her toward the van. She didn't look back again. A chill ran down my spine. I'd thought this was about my inheritance, about one woman's greed, about justice for my dad. But watching Patricia disappear behind steel doors, I realized something. This was bigger than a forged will, bigger than a single predator. And whatever I'd started wasn't done with me yet. The courthouse hallway smelled like old paper and nervous sweat, too bright, too sterile, too full of whispered judgment. Journalists clustered near the elevator, clutching microphones like weapons. Court officers moved with practiced indifference. I sat on a hard wooden bench outside the courtroom, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles ached. Today was the start of Patricia's trial. Ethan sat beside me, one steady hand resting over mine. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. His presence was enough. Across the hall, Patricia's attorney straightened his tie for the 10th time. Chloe, Ethan's ex, stood farther back, arms crossed, eyes thoughtful. She'd taken personal leave from her firm to avoid a conflict of interest, but she came anyway. I still didn't know whether I trusted her, but I couldn't deny she'd helped. Carver family, a court officer called out. My breath caught. It was time. The courtroom buzzed as people took their seats. Reporters, spectators, a few family members of Patricia's previous victims. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Marin Delgado, stood poised with neatly stacked files. Detective Reynolds nodded to me from the second row, a silent promise that I wasn't alone. Then the door opened. Patricia entered, wearing an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed together, chin tilted upward like she was walking a runway instead of being led to the defendant's table. My stomach twisted. She didn't look at me on purpose. That was her game today. Control through indifference. But when she sat down and glanced toward the gallery, her eyes found mine just long enough for me to read one thing clearly. You're next. I didn't look away. The prosecution started with the basics, timeline of events, forged wills, forensic analysis, toxicology. Delgado moved with surgical precision, each detail tightening the noose. The tremor patterns in the original signature, the handwriting expert testified, pointing to charted examples, are absent in the second document. This is consistent with traced or digitally reproduced signatures. Reynolds walked the jury through Patricia's search history. How to poison without detection. Digitalis overdose symptoms. How much digitalis causes fatal arrhythmia? How long until digitalis clears from bloodstream? Each query hit like a hammer. Then came the autopsy findings. 10 times the therapeutic dose, the medical examiner said calmly. No scenario of accidental ingestion could account for this level. Every juror leaned forward, but Patricia stayed serene, reaching for a glass of water like they were discussing someone else's fate. When the prosecution began recounting her past marriages, the tension in the room shifted from curiosity to dread. 2 dead husbands, 2 sudden deaths, 2 last-minute wills naming Patricia as sole heir. One was a suicide, one was a climbing fall. The pattern was undeniable. Still, Patricia's attorney tried. He cross-examined aggressively, crafting flimsy narratives about unsupported conclusions and coincidental tragedies. Then he called Patricia to the stand. She walked up with the poise of a woman accepting an award. "Patricia," the attorney began, "did you love your husbands?" Tears welled instantly, Oscar level. "Yes," she whispered, "with all my heart." "And the digitalis?" he pressed. "The wills? The sudden deaths?" "I would never hurt anyone I loved," she sobbed. "Never." I almost believed her. Almost, if I hadn't known the truth. Then Prosecutor Delgado stepped forward. "Mrs. Carver," she said calmly, "why did your husband's signature on the updated will lack the tremor he had during the last 9 months of his life?" "Medication improvement," Patricia said quickly. Delgado lifted a document. "Your husband's cardiologist testified his tremor worsened during that period." Patricia's jaw clenched. "And why," Delgado continued, "did you search how to forge a signature 2 weeks before your husband's death?" "For a book I was writing." "You were writing a crime novel?" "A thriller," Patricia said. "And the digitalis in his system?" Delgado pushed. 10 times the dose? Patricia's composure cracked. "It was an accident," she snapped. "Medication errors happen." 3 times? Delgado asked softly. "Across 3 husbands?" Silence. Then Patricia slipped. Just enough. "I deserve that money," she spat. "I made his last years happy. That ungrateful girl," her eyes slashed toward me, "never appreciated what her father built." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Delgado nodded once, satisfied. No further questions. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated less than 4 hours. When they returned, not a single juror made eye contact with Patricia. On the charge of first-degree murder, guilty. On the charge of fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. And on the charge of identity theft, guilty. Patricia showed no emotion, not a tear, not a tremble. Just cold calculation. The judge sentenced her to life without parole. As officers led her out, she turned, just enough so only I could see her lips move. "This isn't over." A chill shot through me. But the courtroom doors closed behind her, and for a moment, I thought it was done. I was wrong. 3 weeks later, I was alone in my father's office at the construction company, my company now, going over quarterly reports when a soft knock rattled the glass door. "Come in," I said, expecting Ethan, or maybe an employee needing a signature. Instead, a woman stepped inside. She was in her early 40s, elegant, polished, sharp navy dress, silk scarf, hair pinned neatly. She carried a slim leather portfolio and the confidence of someone who never got turned away. "Hello, Lila," she said, shutting the door behind her. "My name is Diana Walsh." I didn't recognize the name, but her eyes, cold, calculating, felt eerily familiar. "Patricia's sister," she added. My breath froze. No one had mentioned a sister. Diana stepped closer, her heels soft but deliberate on the carpet. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do," I said, reaching for my phone. She lifted one eyebrow. "I wouldn't call anyone just yet." I stopped. "Patricia wasn't working alone," she said. "You must know that by now." I tightened my jaw. She acted on her own. She forged the will. She poisoned my father. Diana smiled, a slow, chilling thing. "Oh, Patricia was talented, but she lacked sophistication. She needed someone with business expertise, someone who could identify wealthy targets, someone who could position assets to be easily transferred." My blood turned to ice. "You planned it," I whispered. She didn't deny it. "You can continue running your little company," Diana said softly, "and live in peace. Or you can dig deeper into what truly happened and lose everything." My hand inched toward my phone again, but she held up a card and set it on my desk. "Diana Walsh, financial consultant. I've been watching you," she added. "You are smarter than Patricia gave you credit for. I hope you are also smart enough to stay alive." Then she turned and walked out of the office like she owned it. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the card. Patricia had been a predator. But Diana was something far worse. And the moment she stepped out of that office, I realized Patricia's warning had been true. This wasn't over, not even close. If Patricia was a monster built from greed and charm, Diana was something carved out of calculation. Every instinct told me to stay away from her. Every memory of my father told me I couldn't. 2 days after Diana's visit, I sat in Detective Reynolds' office, hands clenched around the business card she'd left on my desk. He tapped it once with a pen. Diana Walsh, financial consultant, no criminal history, runs a high-end estate planning firm downtown. Too clean, I muttered. Way too clean, he agreed. He leaned back in his chair, frowning. We can't arrest someone because she's polished and creepy. We need evidence. Real evidence. I'll get it, I said. Reynolds hesitated. Lila, don't get in over your head. It's already over my head, I whispered. But there was something else. A heavy, unfamiliar fear. Because Patricia's crimes had always felt personal. Violent, yes. Evil, yes. But Diana radiated something far more dangerous. Intent. She didn't act out of rage or desperation. She orchestrated. She strategized. She waited. I'd spent 3 years mourning my father. She'd spent 3 years profiting from his death. I couldn't walk away. I scheduled a consultation at Diana's firm. Her office was skyscraper glass and marble, with tightly curated modern art and a receptionist who smiled like she'd been trained by royalty. When Diana arrived, she moved like someone who never wasted time. Lila, she said, offering her hand. I'm glad you reconsidered. I shook her hand, feeling a chill under her perfume. I've been thinking, I said, voice steady, about what really happened to my father. Diana's eyes glittered. Then we should talk truth. She walked me to her inner office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a spotless desk, a single leather-bound portfolio. Your father wasn't just Patricia's husband, she said. He was her assignment. Assignment! The word slammed into me. Diana opened the portfolio. Inside were photos of my father, headshots from the company website, candid shots from community events, even a grainy image of him at the grocery store. 6 months before they met at that charity function, she paused, letting the quote marks cut the air. Patricia began studying him, his routines, his finances, his medical history, his emotional vulnerabilities. I felt physically sick. You orchestrated their meeting, I said. We orchestrated everything, Diana corrected. My sister was impulsive, emotional, but she was excellent at building attachment. I handled the logistics, investments, property valuations, estate transitions. You planned his murder. She smiled faintly. Murder is such an ugly word. We expedite the inevitable. Lonely people die happy. Assets find their rightful home. My father wasn't lonely, I snapped. He had me. He had his company. Precisely, Diana said. You were the obstacle. We underestimated your tenacity. She leaned back. You could join us, you know. My entire body went cold. What? You have the perfect cover, she continued. A grieving daughter who fought for justice only to rise as a successful businesswoman. People trust you. They'd never suspect you. She studied me. With the right guidance, you could become very wealthy. It took every bit of restraint not to lunge across the desk. Instead, I reached subtly into my jacket and tapped my phone, recording app running. Tell me more, I said flatly. Diana talked. And talked. For an hour, she outlined the blueprint of evil. How they identified wealthy widowers and divorcees using financial databases. How operatives like Patricia infiltrated their lives. Church events, charity galas, grief groups. How digitalis was their preferred method because it mimicked natural cardiac death. How wills were forged with practiced signatures. How assets were funneled through shell companies Diana controlled. How they'd done it dozens of times. 12 victims across 8 states. By the time I left her office, my hands were trembling, not from fear, from rage, from triumph. Because Diana had just confessed to everything. On recording. Reynolds nearly fell out of his chair listening to the audio. This is exactly what we needed, he said. Unfiltered confession. Methods, motive, multiple victims. He glanced up, a mix of shock and admiration in his eyes. You're a hell of a risk taker, Lila. Will it be enough? I asked. His mouth curled into a grim smile. Oh, it's enough. The next morning, the FBI and local police raided Diana's office. They found victim profiles, forged documents, financial records, shell company spreadsheets, a data trail stretching across multiple states. Diana was arrested in her penthouse lobby. She didn't fight, didn't scream. She simply looked at me over the heads of the agents and said, You're smarter than Patricia thought. Then she smirked, but not smarter than me. The trial was bigger than anyone expected. Diana didn't need a nickname. Her reputation grew faster than a headline could contain it. 19 confirmed victims, 23 million in stolen assets, a network of trained companions who had hunted wealthy men like prey. Patricia testified against her sister in exchange for a slightly reduced sentence. Watching Patricia describe my father's murder in clinical detail broke something inside me, but it also sharpened something else. Resolve. When I took the stand, the prosecutor asked, "Ms. Carver, what do you want people to understand about this operation?" I looked directly at Diana. "They weren't crimes of passion," I said. "They were business strategies. My father wasn't a person to them. He was an asset to be liquidated." For the first time, Diana blinked. Just once. As if I'd struck something she thought untouchable. The jury found her guilty on all counts. 19 life sentences, consecutive, no parole. But as they led her away in shackles, she leaned close enough for me to hear her whisper, "You think this ends with me?" Months passed. I rebuilt my father's company exactly as he planned, expanding into new cities, hiring dozens of workers, creating spaces that would outlast every predator Diana had trained. Ethan stayed by my side through every storm. Chloe joined the foundation I started, to teach lawyers, doctors, and financial advisors how to spot inheritance predators before they struck. We called it the Carver Initiative. But life had one more twist waiting. 2 years after Diana's sentencing, FBI agent Morrison called me to a secure office downtown. "We found evidence of a fourth operative," she said. "Someone trained directly by Diana." My pulse spiked. "Who?" Morrison placed photos on the table, surveillance shots of a striking woman in her early 30s. "Rachel Montenegro. She's Diana's protege," Morrison said. "Highly trained, highly patient. She's been cultivating her next target for 2 years." My stomach dropped as Morrison slid the last photo across the table. "Rachel laughing over dinner with Judge Harrison. The same judge who sentenced Diana. We think she accelerated his heart condition last night," Morrison said grimly. "Beta blockers were found in his system. He's in ICU." I stood so fast my chair scraped. "We have to stop her." "We're trying," Morrison said. "But she played the perfect grieving widow. She's his emergency contact. She's in the hospital right now." A chill snaked down my spine. Diana's final weapon, a ghost trained to be invisible, a killer planted beside a judge. I didn't hesitate. "We end this tonight," I said. At the hospital, the ICU waiting room hummed with frightened whispers. When I walked in, I saw her immediately. Rachel Montenegro. Beautiful, composed, tearful in a way that felt rehearsed, hands clutching a tissue that wasn't even damp. She stood beside Judge Harrison's adult children, speaking softly as if she were the one comforting them. "He was fine yesterday," she said in a trembling voice. "I just don't understand what happened." I watched her. The subtle adjustments to her expressions, the way she angled her body to appear smaller, sympathetic, the perfect balance of grief and helpfulness. Exactly like Patricia. Exactly like all of them. I stepped forward. "Rachel," I said, voice steady. She turned, eyes wide with feigned confusion. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" "You know who I am," I said. Her gaze flickered, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. The daughter looked between us. "Dad mentioned Lila from the trial." Rachel's smile faltered. Quietly, I said to the family, "She isn't who she says she is." Within an hour, toxicology results came back. Dangerously elevated beta blocker levels. Exactly as Morrison predicted, FBI agents entered the ICU. Rachel was just inside Judge Harrison's room, adjusting the IV drip when Morrison barked, "Step away from the patient." Rachel's face went blank, not frightened, not angry. Blank. She turned slowly. "I don't understand," she said evenly, but the evidence was overwhelming. Surveillance footage of her entering Harrison's home with a pharmacy bag, notes in her apartment detailing his medical vulnerabilities, financial portfolios, a journal titled, "Target Ready," timeline, 30 days. They handcuffed her beside the hospital bed. As they pulled her away, she looked at me and whispered almost lovingly, "Diana was right. You're dangerous." Rachel's arrest triggered a nationwide sweep. 5 more sleeper operatives were found building long-term relationships with wealthy men across the country. Operation Inheritance dismantled the entire network Diana had built piece by piece. Judge Harrison survived, though recovery was long. When he finally left the hospital, he shook my hand. "You saved my life," he said simply. "I just recognized the pattern," I said. "I couldn't let what happened to my father happen to you." He nodded. "Evil evolves, so must we." Years later, I still run Carver Construction, now expanded into multiple cities. But my true calling became the Carver Initiative. We train estate lawyers, doctors, bankers, therapists, anyone likely to encounter vulnerable families, to spot predators like Patricia and Diana. Every time we stop another attacker, another forged will, another accidental heart attack. And I feel like I'm honoring my father all over again. He left me a company. He left me memories. He left me strength I didn't know I had. But the real inheritance? The one no one could steal, forge, or poison away? Purpose.